taking the time to join us today. I really hope you get a lot out of this. The the premise of this kind of started because of where I came from and where we were able to go, not only individually but as a group. And so, I'll just start by saying my dad did everything he could to really help me understand the value of a dollar, even to the point of like some child slave labor laws that I'm still not sure if he broke or not. But it wasn't until I started earning money and then lost all of it that I realized the importance of having a plan, having a system, and having something set that doesn't allow you to make mistakes, right? Or it severely limits your chances of making mistakes. So my quick backstory: I was going to be an attorney my whole life, and I was enrolled in law school at USD. I was broke and didn't have any money to pay for law school, so I needed to work for a year before I went. I become somewhat disenchanted with the legal system, so I didn't really want to go to law school. I just didn't know what else to do, and got a call from my brother-in-law. Said, I made $7,000 my first month working at a mortgage company. It's incredible. They took me out to this amazing dinner, and I said, "What's a mortgage? And is there one of those around here that I can work at?" So that's how I got in the mortgage business, and in a very short period of time, was making really good money for a 22, 23-year-old kid. And everything that my dad tried to teach me just fully went out the window. And there was no one, I never learned in high school, I never learned in college. There was no personal wealth or finance classes. There was no classes on real estate or holistic financial best practices, which I think is an absolute atrocity. And so going from being $80,000 in debt with a house that was $300,000 or more upside down, and next to a few $100s in the bank, to getting to a point where we're searching for financial freedom and on that path, led me to realize that we can help a lot more people. That's why our mortgage practice is based on a lot more than just giving people mortgages, right? It's based on holistic financial best practices, and we use real estate and the mortgage as kind of the baseline for us to operate off of, and then we refer out all of the other kind of ancillary areas. So that's why I put together this workshop. We do it for our clients, we do it for our partners, we do it for our employees, and for their families as well. So I'll walk everybody through this. If you have questions, feel free to just type it in the Q&A, type it in the chat box. We can even unmute, and you guys can kind of chat back and forth. So just wanted to make sure that everyone's aware that this can definitely be a dialogue type conversation, not just a one-way thing. All right, so first and foremost, this is my disclaimer. My team will tell you before everything, your health is way more important than your money. I used the analogy the other day, you're a billionaire, you're sitting out on the beach looking at your $100 million yacht, life's great, but every time you swallow, you have this terrible sore throat. And the only thing in life that you want is for this sore throat to go away, right? And that's just an indication is no amount of money in the world will ever help if you don't have your health, right? So make sure that's number one, and then start working on your money. It says every day is another chance to get stronger, eat better, live healthier, and be the best version of you. Again, you guys didn't come here for a health seminar, so I'm not going to dive into it. But when you think about money and business and income and revenue, realize it has to be tempered with, if you're not healthy first, none of the rest matters. It'll catch up to you, and you'll wish that you had a different vision of it. So financial freedom, there's a technical aspect of what it is, and essentially it's the status of having enough income from your investments or passive businesses or real estate to pay for your living expenses for the rest of your life without having to rely on informal employment. Right? Earned income without having to work a job is commonly referred to as passive income. So financial freedom is the point in your life, and we all should really strive to accomplish it. And I'm not saying that you have to get there so you can stop working. A lot of people have been there or are there and are still continuing to work because they love it, which is totally fine. But financial freedom is when you've gotten to a point in life where you no longer have to go generate income from a normal formal employment in order to live the life you want to live, right? So your real estate investments, your dividend interest from your securities, your retirement plan, your distributions, all of the wealth that you've amassed is now paying you back with passive income and distributions and dividends, where you can live absolutely the life you want to live. You never have to go work for it again. It says we can see the PowerPoint, not the full screen. I'm kind of keeping it not the full screen for a reason. There's some notes I have here on the side that if I full screen it, I can't do that. Can everyone see this okay? Or is it too small? Tom, can you see this okay?
Yeah, I can see it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
He's probably referring to the fact that it's the full screen, not actually in presentation mode.
Yeah. I didn't put it in presentation mode for a reason. I just have some notes over here on the right that I want to refer to. All right. So that's what financial freedom is, and we're going to talk about how to get there. So one of the best and most important books that I've ever read on this subject, and one that I'd highly recommend you all reading, is The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason. So this book is a really easy way to digest, all the ins and outs of the most basic things around finance. And so it breaks it down into kind of 7, they call it 7 remedies for a lean purse, right? Rules to live by to grow your wealth. So the first law of money that they refer to in this book is saving at least 10% of your net earnings in an account meant to grow over time to be used for the benefit of your future self. So if you make $5,000 a month, right, the goal is that 500 of that pays yourself. Right? So you always hear it's not what you make, it's not what you keep that matters. Or it's not what you make, it's what you keep that matters. I know plenty of people, especially in the real estate and mortgage business, that make a lot of money and save very little or actually none because they have what's called life creep or scope creep, which is where you continue to spend more as you earn more. And that really just continues to make you earn more because you can't save it. So always pay yourself first. 10% is the number you want to shoot for. And if you're saying, Ryan, I just can't get to that 10% number, that's understandable, right? Start with 1%, start with 2%, start with 5%. Getting to 10% is where you want to be. Ultimately, the bigger that number is, the faster you reach that financial freedom point. And so you can actually gamify this, right? You can like create a game with yourself and your spouse where you say, all right, like we're at 8%. Let's get to 10% by June, right? Let's get to 12% by the end of next year. Let's get to 15% by this time frame. And that will be where you derive your pleasure, not in expenses and, we call it borrowed trouble, right? Borrowed trouble is buying the nice new car, buying the more expensive house than you need, buying the items that really fill more of an emotional void than a tangible one. So making sure that you do, this is the first thing first, right? Like always pay yourself first. Somebody's asking, where do you put the 10% that you save? We're going to get into that. So we'll talk about different buckets as we go through. It's a great question. And Thomas, if you don't mind, maybe just man the chat and then ask me questions as they come up so I don't have to keep kind of going back and forth between them, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I have a quick question right here from, where do you put the 10% that you save?
Yep, I just answered that.
I got it. Cool. I got this.
Yeah, so we'll get to that here in a second as to what you do at different stages. They're called buckets, and there's like a waterfall strategy. But this is the first law of money, right? Pay yourself first. A lot of people use the alternate strategy where, they earn their income and then they pay bill, expense, fun, this, that, the other, dinner, and then whatever they have left over is what they save. And oftentimes you run out that way, right? The best thing you can do is just an auto withdrawal into another account, and we'll talk about what to do with that from there. But then you only spend what's left, right? And you kind of reduce it down to zero. So always pay yourself first. Oh, sorry. Second law of money here, create a budget based on necessities and reality, right? So with only 80 to 90% of your income. And you want to do this because we all have income fluctuations, especially if you're in the real estate and finance business, which I know a lot of people on this call are. We can't count on 100. The biggest mistake that I've personally made, and I know a lot of people do, is they have a month or two in a row where they make good money, and then all of a sudden that's their new norm. And it's like, that's not an average for you. That's kind of an anomaly. But it happened, and so they believe it will continue to happen. I believe the lower you can get this number, like if you can get to a 60 to 70% of your income number and budget based off of that, that just doesn't give you the absolute necessity and pressure to go outperform month after month after month to hit those numbers. Now, obviously, you'll still want to do that, but you don't need to necessarily put the pressure on yourself if you don't have to. So Don't confuse necessity with desire, and don't ignore desire completely, right? So when you think of what's necessary to live, that's important, right? Desire is a very different thing. Necessity is shelter, right? It's it's food, it's clothes, but only the clothes you actually need, not the clothes you want, right? It's gas, it's health insurance, it's the real necessities that without, like, life just doesn't happen, right? Or it becomes extremely challenging. And then you don't want to ignore desire completely, because then you get into a point where there's no joy, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, the psychology of money. There has to be some joy that makes what you're doing even worth it, right? So it can't be completely taken out of the budget, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So creating a budget, we have helped thousands and thousands and thousands of clients with their mortgages over the last however many years, and less than 2% of them have budgets. It's always a complete surprise when someone says, yeah, I have a budget, do you want me to pull it up? I'm blown away because of the time, energy, and attention that can take. But please know that you're trying to get somewhere on a roadmap without knowing where you're starting or where you're going without a budget. So it's extremely important. And we'll talk about how to use budgets here in a little bit. So large income that is mismanaged is much worse than smaller income that is handled well. Same premise as last time, right? It's not what you make, it's what you keep. Third law of money here, make thy goal multiply, right? So the money we make from our earnings is just a start. The earnings, the money we'll make will build our income. Very few wealthy or financially free people have done it based on earned income, right? What they've done is they've multiplied earned income in different investment avenues. It's really rare that you're going to take your 9 to 5 earnings, no matter how much it is, and get to the point where you want to get to. Now, you may have a phenomenally high 9 to 5 earning that would help you accomplish it, but it's really not going to get you, if you become accustomed to that type of lifestyle, you need to continue that income all the way through. Whereas if your money multiplies for you and you invest it appropriately and you do it for the long term, that's where you hit that financial freedom point. So it becomes kind of a stream of wealth that constantly flows back to you as opposed to out from you. So that's the third law of money. Fourth law of money is guard thy treasure from loss. So make sure your investments are secure, engage the risk versus reward, right? So any investment you make, understand the risk component of it, right? There's some, you may get the opportunity to invest in a startup, or, to, try and do something that has a low likelihood of high level success, but if it does, it's a massive multiple return versus a treasury yield or a certificate of deposit, right? Or a mutual fund that, or a life insurance policy, like a cash value life insurance policy. Those are going to have low returns, but safe returns, right? So understand what you're actually investing in, and then make sure you have the right insurances to avoid catastrophic losses. And we'll get into those in a little bit as well. But really try and avoid get rich quick thinking. You hear get rich quick a lot, right? You hear the invested in Bitcoin, invested in Google or Facebook early, invested in all these things. Nobody had a single clue that any of those companies were going to be as successful as they were, right? They were all speculative bets. And hindsight makes everyone look like a genius. But realize that, the get rich quick thinking happens rarely, but the people who are disciplined and they do the things that don't have immediate reward, but will get billed every day and week and month, that's how rich people really become wealthy, right? Is more discipline than it is finding the right investment. So try and just be clear on that as you're looking at where you're putting your money.
Really quickly, guys, I thought it'd be fun just to have a quick poll. So I'm just going to put this right here. It's anonymous. If you want to quickly answer it, do you have a personal budget? Keep going around.
Cool. All right. Next is make thy dwelling a profitable investment. Short answer, own a home. 87% of the wealthiest people in America have made a large portion of their earnings or their income on real estate, right? Whether it's primary or multiple investments, commercial, whatever the case may be. But very few people have become independently wealthy without owning at least their property that they're in. And if you think about it, if any part of your 90% of your income can actually go back to you, right, then your earnings and savings grow even faster. So, you take 10% and you pay yourself, you have 90% to pay the bills, but of that 90%, if some of that is rent, it's all going out. Whereas if some of it is the mortgage, which you own the home on, a large portion of it's coming back, right? It's you paying down the principal of the mortgage, and that is a forced savings account. Not to mention the tax benefits and other things that could potentially be there. Let's see, what is the average return on residential real estate? Sorry, Tom, if you can get those. I just keep seeing it pop up. The average return on residential real estate, depending upon the city or county, is going to be anywhere from 4.5% to 6.5%. Orange County has been 6.4% for the last 80 years. It's kind of or I think last 60 years is kind of our running average. So, but then when you look at investment properties, right, then you have different rates of return, right? Because now not only do you have appreciation, but you have cash flow, right? So this here is just talking about owning your primary residence, right? So it says every man or woman should own the roof over their head. So make sure that, as a part of your plan, that you are looking at, okay, how can I make my domicile a profitable resource for me? One that I'm returning revenue to myself, and one that's growing from a year-over-year perspective. And
so really quickly,
yep,
I'm just going to get us the results from these polls. So looks like 58% of you guys, which is 7 of you, have a personal budget. Good job. And then we have a no and a bunch of kindas. So maybe here in a little bit, we'll get to some of the different tools that you guys are using.
Yeah.
Who do have a budget. Good job on you.
Yeah, for the 58% that has a budget, that's amazing. It's a much higher number than normal, but that's probably also the reason you've come to this seminar, right? All right. Next is going to be ensure a future income. So this is where you really want to focus on retirement savings, life insurance, rental properties. These are all things that are hard to do today, but make life easier into the future, right? And when I say pay yourself first, we'll talk about where that 10% goes into the different buckets, but people constantly make decisions that are short-term, feel better moves, right? Like, oh, I want to buy this, I want to buy this, I want to go here, I want to do this, I want to do that, because it makes them feel good in the moment, but it makes life really hard when life is going to get harder. So if you can do the things now that don't create immediate gratification and you delay that gratification, the upside is so much larger because that money has so much longer to work, right? And then the things that you thought were cool that you were doing in your 20s and 30s are paling in comparison to what you're doing in your 50s and beyond, right? So making sure that you always think future income, future income, future income, future income. And we'll even get into the psychology around spending in regards to that as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's the 6th law of money. And the last one here is increase the ability to earn. So, be in the front ranks of progress and do not stand still lest be left behind. Everything great in life is on the other side of fear. Can't tell you how important this one is, because a lot of times people think, well, this is what I make, right? And if this is what I make, then this is what I can spend, this is blah, 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 and they back into it without ever realizing, well, if you drastically increase the opportunity of what you can make, well, then it gets you to your financial freedom point a lot faster. And I'll tell you what, no one has ever gotten wealthy or really successful by managing expenses. I mean, granted, there's millionaires out there, people that have a net worth of $1 million or more, that have made $50,000 a year for 30 years. And they've just been really diligent. But it's also been a pretty, like, that same person has had a really tough, kind of challenging, not super fun, maybe unjoyous life, because maybe they just never thought, well, I can make 100 a year, right? Or I can make 150 or 200 a year, because they had some sort of mental limit, right? Or some sort of fear around advancing. And if any of you know our group, right, the region, that is not even remotely close to our vocabulary, right? We all understand that we can do more, we can be more. And if you want to make more money, then just be worth more, right? And that's why it's super important, like I said, to be in the front ranks of progress, Do not stand still. Don't do what everyone else is doing. If 30 people are making X amount of money and you're over here looking at them thinking, you're doing well, but you should be doing this, that, and the other. Like, you want to be the one person who's not with the group, right? You want to be bucking the trend that the other people are doing. And most people just look for comfort in life, right? And so if you can increase or invest in yourself, your ability to learn more, which then makes you worth more, then it just makes all of these things we're talking about happen that much faster. So make sure that if you have fear around getting to that next level, that, talk to me, talk to anybody, but work through that, because there's an opportunity for everybody to increase their earnings. All right, so those are the 7 areas, kind of the different kind of most impactful things when it comes to wealth and wealth creation. Pay yourself first is always the most important one. That's why they put it number 1. And this is where we want to talk about kind of what to do with that 10%. So what's not on here is debt, because debt doesn't fall into a bucket. Debt is something that needs to be paid off and paid down and eradicated really at all possible costs. There is a case to be made. So let's say you have $20,000 in debt, right? And when I say debt, I'm meaning consumer debt. So non-car payments, non-housing payments. All right, so this is maybe personal loans, maybe student loans, maybe credit cards. And let's just say that's a $20,000 number for round numbers. You want to try and get all those down to the lowest interest rates you possibly can first. So you can do credit card transfers to 0% credit cards. So you're really paying the least amount of interest possible. If you're 6% or below in terms of your interest rate that you're paying on that debt, then it's okay to take 5% and put in your savings and 5% to pay down your debt. Because what you really want is an emergency fund. And this is what we're all working so hard, and we're all here on this call today because we want to, at the end of the day, sleep better. Like, let's just be honest, right? We want less stress and anxiety around money. We want to know that our children are going to be secure. We want to know that, if someone's air conditioner goes out at their house, or they have a car accident, or they have a big medical expense that comes up for some reason, that they're not going to go under, right? They're not going to go bankrupt. They're not going to have to sell things. They're not going to have to liquidate, insurances. That they have an emergency fund. So the debt and the emergency fund debate is, you'll get 1,000 different people telling you 1,000 different things, but the emergency fund should be no less than 3 months of your absolute necessities. And when I say absolute necessities, I want you to think, if I had to go Spartan, right? And I mean, like, just paying the utilities to keep the lights and water and keep rent going or keep the mortgage going, and I had to, just get down to the basics, right? Like, not go late on any car payments or anything, pay for schooling, whatever it is, food, necessities, bills, medicine. If I had to do that, what's that number, right? So when you're doing your budget, you need to know kind of what your Spartan number is, and then you need to know your real number. And what I would urge you is try and get 3 months to 6 months of your real number, right? But if you can't do that, at least get 3 to 6 months of your Spartan number, right? Like your absolute. If you spend money on nothing else, you have at least that. Now, if you have variable income, which if you're in the mortgage or real estate business, you highly likely have, I would urge you to get to 12 months on that number. And I know it's hard, right? If you spend $5,000 a month or 10 grand a month, whatever your budget may be, that could be, let's call it $7,500. That could be $90,000 that you need to have in a liquid, high yield savings account of some sort, right? So you can have it in a 1.5%, 2.5%. I think Morgan Stanley has an online account, Capital One. There's a lot of these high yield online savings accounts that are FDIC insured up to $250,000, so your money's safe. And it's a high rate of return because there's not a lot of overhead. That's where that money should be. And that is look, things could happen. Business could slow down. I could get hurt. There could be an issue, but I'm still okay because I have that. Everything else after that is better, but anything before that is challenging. And so when you think about paying off debt versus that emergency fund bucket, you want to look at it and say, like, this debt is keeping me from moving money down the line here. So I want to put maybe 5% into paying off debt, 5% into the emergency fund, right? Or if you can get 15%, right? 10% of the emergency fund, 5% to paying off debt. If you cannot get that debt below 6% through balance transfers, renegotiations, refinances, then really I would urge you to heavily work towards paying all that debt off first, right? Make sure your debtors are paid off and then get into your emergency fund, because the last thing you want to happen is, you go into bankruptcy, or, you have to default on those credit cards or those debts. It just becomes really challenging to work back after your credit becomes that impacted or that challenged. So diligently work to pay off debt. And then from a debt perspective, pay your credit card off every single month. That should be an absolute non-negotiable in this entire seminar. I'm totally okay. We put everything on credit cards, right? But every month there's an automatic withdrawal where it just pays off the entire balance. Never pay a dime of interest to anybody except, a low interest rate on the house. And everything else should be to the point where, it's just paid off consistently. Now, you may have some student loan debts, hopefully those have low interest rates. You may have some car loans with, they should definitely be low interest rates there. Again, you'll have a mortgage, hopefully that rate's in the twos somewhere. And, those things are okay, right? They're revolving, right? Or I'm sorry, they're not revolving, they're installments, right? And typically they're paid off by a certain time frame. A lot of cars you can get at 0, 1%, right? It actually makes more sense to utilize that money elsewhere than paying off an installment debt there. So I'm okay with those types of things, but any revolving credit card debt should be paid off each month. And then essentially you just use the points, right? That's the only reason you're putting things on the credit card, is to amass the points to be able to then use for travel or, entertainment, gifts, whatever it is you want to use them for. So there's a great reason to use credit cards. Just make sure they're paid off every month. Now, getting into what to do with the rest of your money. So let's say credit cards, debt's paid off, and you have, 6 months into your emergency fund, and you want to keep going to more towards 12. If you have a fairly consistent income, or maybe you have a spouse that has a fairly consistent income, and you feel comfortable that you'd bounce back easily within 6 months, then 6 months is just fine, right? It's the variable incomes where, rates go to 5% and people stop buying, selling homes, people stop refinancing. Like, in our world, we could be impacted by that substantially, and we need a longer runway to be able to get back to our normal earning capabilities. So I would say variable income, try and get to 12 months, normal income, consistent, comes in pretty much every month. Your job's pretty safe, right? Like, pretty immune to market conditions. 6 months would be a good number there. So we have something else in the chat here. Okay, this is Tom. So next is going to be your retirement plan. You want to, after you have your emergency fund set up and you have your debt paid off, you want to put as much money as you can into your long-term pre-tax employer retirement plan. If you're a real estate professional and you're self-employed, you have an awesome opportunity to do what's called SEP, or self-directed IRAs, which means you can put up to $56,000 away every year into a pre-tax retirement fund. Or you could put it into a Roth IRA, and you put 56 into that, and that money grows tax-free. My recommendation is always Roth, especially when you're younger. So, the longer runway you have, most of you may not know, but you have a Roth 401k, right? That's a part of your 401k that you have access to. You have Roth IRAs that you can put money into. Roth essentially is saying you're going to pay the taxes up front, but all the gains you're going to get over time is going to go tax-free. So when you take it out at a later date, you don't have to pay taxes on it at that time. And for those of you who think we have high taxes now, it's going to be pretty pale in comparison to what our taxes will be, especially with our current monetary policy. We are printing money at an astonishing rate, and the only way to really combat that is to, raise taxes and to continue to try and claw that money back. So even, if Biden wins this election, we could see a 39% top tax bracket as opposed to 36, right? And so depending upon where you fall in that range of federal taxes, and if you're in California, which my assumption is most of you are, we may go to 16% in California. So we could see within 90 days an additional 5 to 6% tax jump. So when you're thinking, if you have money in your 401k, right, or your IRA right now, or traditional IRA, let's say you get to retirement and you have $2 million, right? And you're thinking, awesome, right? I'm going to get, maybe at least, 1.5, 1.4 after taxes. But if taxes go up, another 25%, you could lose $500,000 that you thought you'd be getting down the line because of a higher tax bracket. And again, if you do this right, it's going to be hard to keep your tax bracket low because you're going to have mandatory distributions, right? You're going to have, dividend interest income coming in. You'll have real estate, ideally you'll have rental income coming in from there. So most people think, well, my income will be less at retirement, but that's not always the case. And if it's not, and the tax brackets are higher, that's when you want to pay the taxes now and let that money grow tax-free. So I would always recommend the Roth version of whatever your employer retirement plan is, but absolutely put it in there, especially if there's an employer match. If there's an employer match, I mean, it's free money, right? So take advantage of that. Any sort of pre-tax or, tax accruing, non-tax accruing thing is really great.
Hey, Ryan, quick question.
Yeah.
From someone. Do you recommend funding your 401k more than your company matches?
I do, because
Why?
I believe that long term that will pay off for you in spades, right? Because again, if it can grow tax free, right, especially if it's like a Roth 401k, put as much money in there as you can. I mean, if you could put $100,000 in a year into a Roth and have that grow substantially, all of it's tax-free money, right? And again, should be higher taxes. And if that grows at an average of 6 to 7% per year, which is the historical growth pattern, that's a phenomenal amount of money that if you put anywhere else would have been taxed either initially or along the way, right? If you put it into a mutual fund, or you put it into individual investments or a managed funds account, right? Every year that money grows and you take it out, you're paying capital gains on that money, right? So you'll be taxed on it, and there's also a little bit more volatility. Plus, the consistency of it is gonna wane. So I would always recommend maxing out your retirement plan. Now, as you get older, as you get closer to retirement, then I would say probably not, right? Because there may be other usages for it. So some of this depends on age. And again, I'm not a certified financial planner. I just slept at a Holiday Inn last night. No, I'm joking. I know enough to be dangerous here, but I would always highly recommend getting with a certified financial planner and having them actually create and develop the plan specifically for you based on your earnings, your age, your outlook, your goals, and some of the things you want to do. And they'll give you a lot more clarity there. Next is going to be kind of supplemental savings, right? So I kind of blended the two here. This would be really your 401k. This would be IRAs, educations. So this would be 529 plans for your kids. It would be Roth or traditional IRAs. It would be any sort of universal transfer to minor type account, anything that would allow you to build or grow kind of pre-tax, right? So 529 can grow without taxes. IRAs can grow with or without taxes, depending on how you do them. So you want to fill that bucket. And these all have limits, so you can only put in a certain amount per year, which is why once that bucket's full, everything at that point then turns into an opportunity fund. Before I jump into this, I want to talk about this. Any windfalls or unexpected income. So it could be an inheritance. It could be a bonus at work you weren't expecting. It could be, one of your investments, just does amazingly well, or, you get a stock option sale or something. That any additional money that was not a part of your plan, 10% of it can go into your fund, right? And that's not the only amount, right? You can also use some of this, but I would always put, 90%, and then, this is where your joy comes into play. This is why you're doing this, right? This is why we're all working so hard, is so we can ultimately enjoy life. It shouldn't be just a bunch of, X's and O's in, spreadsheets and in budgetary terms. So any unexpected money goes there, 10%. The other 90% of that windfall goes down the chain here. So this opportunity fund is essentially, when these are all full, now you have the opportunity to invest in really anything that you want, right? And this is a matter of being diversified. So at this point, you have your insurances, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So you're paying for life insurance, disability insurance. You have the right home and auto and umbrella policies, right? So you have your expenses are fine. But another version of opportunity one could be like a whole life policy, right? It could be mutual funds, it could be individual stocks, it could be investing in companies, it could be investing in real estate. At this point, once these are all taken care of, most financial planners will tell you the same thing. If these are all taken care of, it should pretty much get you close to financial freedom at retirement, depending upon how well you manage your expenses. And this is what's going to put you over the top, right? This is what will really get you where you want to go.
Good time to share these results and maybe just quickly talk about, can you see the results when I share them on screen?
Yep.
Cool. So most people here don't have a financial planner or somebody helping them with their finances. At what point should somebody maybe actually, actively be looking for somebody to, get help with their financial planning? I could speak for, I know we met with a financial planner a couple of weeks back, and I think that, sometimes they look at this and they're all like, why wouldn't you pay 1% to get 5% back? Right? It makes sense to a financial planner. And I think that we've talked about this, but for anybody who doesn't have a financial planner, would like one, or doesn't see value in it, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think a financial planner is huge. I think it's a necessity because just like any other aspect of life, there is what you can do on your own, and then there's what you should do, right? Now, you can do a lot of this on your own, but are you going to know when to reallocate your money because of tax law changes, right? Are you going to know when to sell a property because of changes in the code to be able to now 1031 exchange things? Are you going to know when your family should do something because of changes in the estate planning or estate tax and gift tax? Like all these things are changing pretty much yearly now, right? How much money you can put into certain things. You're going to have different levels of income. You could figure all this out, right? But I'm a firm believer in do what you do really well and surround yourself with people that do the things they do really well. As long as you trust them, as long as they come from a verified source, as long as they are proactive. Now, most financial planners, I would argue, are just wealth managers. They just say, give me your money and I'll invest it. I think that you could take that or leave it. I think a certified financial planner is someone who meets with you at least twice a year, who analyzes your situation consistently, and who keeps you on track. Same reason you have a personal trainer. Could you work out on your own? Sure. But does a personal trainer get more out of you? 100%. Right? Same reason you have a nutritionist. Could you eat well on your own? Sure. But do they maximize your energy and your macronutrients and all those things? 100%. So I can't stress enough how important it is just to get an initial plan with something. There's financial planners that will just set you on a plan, and maybe they have a flat fee or something, and then you go on your way. Maybe you meet with them once a year. Maybe you start investing money with them. There's a lot of different opportunities you can go there, but I really wouldn't do this alone because, look, you're not going to know it as well as they do. And if you trust them, whatever you pay them, they will make you 20 times over. Same reason why you should use a really great real estate professional, right? You could use anybody, or you could do it yourself, right? But the real estate professional adds a substantial amount of value. Same thing with mortgage professionals, right? So I think we should practice what we preach with some of our clients, and the same thing holds true. I think a lot of reason that people don't go to financial planners is because they don't believe they have substantial enough assets for it to be worth that person's time, or they may feel embarrassed about their financial situation, or they may just not want to face it themselves. If that's the case, we can put you in touch with financial planners that are non-judgy, that don't care how much money you have, don't care how much money you make, and they will help you just put you on a path. And I can't tell you how confident that will make you, right? Because you've taken the first step, which is expose a weakness, which we all have, and then from there, it's just a pattern of fixing it, right? And turning the dials a little bit. So definitely recommend getting in touch with a financial planner. So this opportunity fund, kind of getting back to that, is all the areas in which you could use your money to really grow it and take it to the next level. And this is where you have to look at, make thy goal multiply, which you're really doing down the line, but really here. And then also guarding thy treasure from loss, right? Your opportunity fund, you don't want to, continue to invest in things that are overly risky. right. If you have questions, again, feel free to open that up. And again, this will be drastically different for every person. Some people might have real estate in their portfolio and they want to diversify out of that into, equities and the stock market. Some people might be the other way around. Some people may not have enough of a life insurance, which is kind of a risk averse portion of it. So the diversity in this opportunity fund is important, and it all really depends upon kind of your personal belief in some of those areas. All right, so let's jump into survival number. I think it's important here. So, and again, we'll send you guys over this deck, so you'll have access to it. You just email us or text us, and Tom will get it out to everyone. But you want to get into housing, auto, water maintenance, some of the things, daycare, some of the things that are actually going to be really important. Monthly savings, 401k. And you'll get what your survival number is here, and then you have your net income for the month when you put everything kind of all in play there. So you just do a quick cross check by adding all the net deposits to make sure this is accurate. I personally wouldn't use an Excel spreadsheet for this, which is why I'll get into this next. I'm a huge believer in mint.com. There's other resources like this. There's ynab.com, which is You Need a Budget. It's kind of an acronym for it. In my experience, Mint has been the most thorough and the most beneficial. Essentially, you link everything into this platform. It is very secure. It is a high level of data security. And so, you have to feel comfortable around it. But I promise you, if you have to go into your budget every month and look at each bank statement, look at your bank statements, type in what you spent, that's going to last for like 30 minutes. And it's the most drawn out, boring, not fun thing ever, because you're like, oh, I shouldn't have spent money on that. I should have spent money on that. And you're like, this is making me feel bad. I'm over it, and I'm not going to do it again. So for some of you who answered, you kind of have a budget. That means you kind of started one time and you have a decent understanding, but you don't really follow it. This does all of it for you, right? So would highly recommend, go to mint.com, sign up, you can put in all your credit cards, you put in all your bank accounts, you put in your investment accounts, everything that you have from an asset and a debt perspective, and it will create your budget for you and with you. So, you can see everything in one place. You can see all your cash, your credit cards, you can see your investments, you can kind of see kind of a net worth number. It'll show you all the different kind of outlays you have. And again, you gamify this stuff, right? So the biggest question is, can you afford your current lifestyle on your current income? And the hint is a budget will give you the answer. Most people, unfortunately, can't really answer that, right? They can't answer, can I afford my current lifestyle, my current income? They know that they're doing well enough. And the most common answer I get is, well, I'm saving more than I'm spending. And that's enough for most people, right? Are you going positive or are you going negative? And if they're going positive, that's okay. But that doesn't mean that they can afford their current lifestyle, because just going positive doesn't mean that it's going well, right? Because going positive might mean that you have $1,000 left over at the end of the month, but if you didn't put money into your retirement plan, if you didn't fund your IRAs or your college savings accounts, if you didn't move money into paying down certain debts or whatever, then yeah, you have $1,000 left over, but you didn't fill the buckets previously. So you might think, well, I'm doing well, but if you realize the amount that you could have contributed, you'd have way less money. You'd have a negative number at the end of that month, right? So when I say afford your current lifestyle, it's not just can you afford to live how you're living, it's can you fill every bucket you need to fill, pay off all the debts you need to pay off, and still have enough money left over to then go into the opportunity fund, right? Which is where you really start to see the multiplication. So that's why a budget is so important, because it will tell you immediately whether you can afford your current lifestyle or not. Next, step 2 here is identify and eliminate any unnecessary spending. This is easier said than done. If it were easy, you'd already be doing it. Look, I can tell you this is a polarizing experience, right? You kind of either love this or you hate it. And budget's a dirty word, but if I were to ask you a question, if you're going to run out of money, when do you want to know? Right? Would you rather know today when you're going to run out of it, or do you want to know the day it happens? Hint, answer is you want to know today. If you knew you were going to run out of money 20 years from now, you would drastically make changes so you don't run out of money 20 years from now. But if 20 more years from now you run out of money, there's no backtracking, right? So that's why it's so important to work through the unnecessary spending and get really clear, right? So goal would be to comfortably spend 80% of your income and save 20. Now, again, that's higher than the 10% number we talked about, but this is a goal. The 10% was kind of more of a necessity, right? To get to that point. If you can't get to that 10% number, just plan on working kind of forever. And some people will do that intrinsically, and some people are okay with that, right? And everybody's going to have a different path. But if you can get to 20%, then you really start to accelerate, what your options look like when you want to or potentially desire to retire. So where's money spent today? Consider your survival number needs before spending, and be disciplined but reasonable in your spending cuts. Caution here, don't go so far into your spending cuts and make the process of saving unsustainable. Again, it's a get rich slow plan, not fast. If you can cut off from your monthly costs and get 8% of your cash unspent, don't worry, you can expand your savings. So like I said, you don't have to start off with 20, you don't have to start off with 10. If you can get to 5 or 8, whatever the number is, great. But if you get to the point to where you've taken all joy out of every month and you have no unnecessary spending at all and anything that gives you any sort of gratification or gamification around, I did so well, I earned this trip to the movies or whatever it is, right? Like it could be a big or small thing. So just be clear on that. So tip 1, slash spending on things you don't care much about. I can't tell you how often people will buy things and then have this. I bought a $8,000 watch when I was 23 years old, the same week that I bought a $120,000 car and a $760,000 house. And if I could go back, I wear that watch still today because I want to remind myself never to do something that stupid ever again. In the moment, it felt great, but I did not need that, nor did I ever need that, nor do I ever need that again, right? And from on the car tip, you want to spend 10% of your annual income on a car. I know that's going to make a lot of people's eyes pop, right? But if you make $100,000 a year, your car should cost $10,000. Right? And I'm not saying you should have a $10,000 loan. I'm saying your entire car should cost $10,000. If you make $200,000 a year, your car should cost $220,000. And I know everyone's thinking, no way, that's crazy. There's no way you could do that. You can. Just how important is what you drive, right? And so this is kind of the difference between the Spartan and the someone who's a little bit more pragmatic. And you can land anywhere you want to land on that. But I can't tell you how many people will make $100,000 a year and then buy an $80,000 car just because the monthly payment works. And that's the biggest trap that we all fall into is we think monthly, I can afford it monthly, I can afford it monthly. And that's just not the way that we want to live here. So tip 2, yes.
I'm going to take this quick second. I threw a poll up there, guys. If you feel comfortable referring somebody, Ryan, go ahead and answer that. I just wanted to also let you know, I'm putting in the chat again, that phone number to text Ryan if you want an introduction to a financial planner, just because that was an anonymous poll and I don't know who you are. So go ahead and make sure you text Ryan if you want an introduction to a financial planner. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah. So tip 2, again, pay your credit card balances in full each month. If you can't pay out the highest rate card first. Tip 3, don't buy problems. I just talked about, you don't want to buy expensive cars, boats, anything that creates more cost, right? Even a primary residence is a liability. Most people think a primary residence is an asset, but it's not. An asset is defined as something that can earn income, right? So a stock is an asset, an investment property is an asset, something that will grow in value. A primary residence has costs of upkeep, maintenance. You don't earn revenue off of that. So I'm not saying don't buy a home. Obviously, that's counterintuitive. But cars, boats, jewelry, watches, just leave those alone if you can. Tip 4, gamify your savings and get your satisfaction from that. I just have this weird thing where every day I look at my mint.com account and I have a Wealthfront account as well because it has some if you have a lot of assets that you're managing, Wealthfront is another good tool. And I look at it and the goal is that I'm constantly moving up, and I set a new goal each month and I set a new goal every 6 months, and I get all the satisfaction in the world from that as opposed to going and buying something. And I've actually retrained my mind to where now when I buy something, I think, crap, I'm not going to get to that number, right? Or I'm not going to reach that goal. Like we're getting a new air conditioner put in right now. Not something I was super pumped about, right? Because it took me away from that next goal, but something that had to happen. And then tip number 5, not spending money is like getting paid to not buy something. If you can reframe that, and you can do like in Amazon, right? People buy stuff on Amazon, click, click, easy. Put it in your cart and wait 24 hours, and then come back and ask yourself, do you still want it? Do you still need it? And then reframe it to say, all right, I'm about to spend $50 on this. If I don't buy that, it's like someone just gave me $50. Even better, if I don't buy this, it's like someone gave me $80, right? Because I had to pay 30% of taxes to spend that $50. So if you can gamify and kind of retrain your mind to think, I'm about to spend $50 on this. I had to make $80 to buy that. If I don't, it's like someone's giving me $80 back. I'm not going to buy it. All right, so those are the types of kind of mental gymnastics that you can kind of do with yourself just to kind of rein in spending. And it's the biggest problem we have because we're a consumer economy. We have been trained for some reason to buy things to make us feel better or to fill voids, as opposed to working towards a better ultimate quality of life, which is a financial freedom point down the line. Next, step 3 is set up a float account. This is something that you want to do, and I can't recommend this enough. Essentially, and I'll let you guys read it here, but immediately when money hits your checking account, like an auto deposit, ideally all of your income comes in through auto deposit, direct deposit, just goes in your bank account. A float account is you immediately, it's either a percentage, and your bank can set this up with you. So you can do a percentage or a flat number. So if $5,000 comes into your account, $1,000 leaves, right? And it goes into your float account, which is Capital One 360, Immigrant Direct, all money markets. These are all high yield savings accounts. Then you just don't have to worry about it, right? It doesn't take any discipline. You don't actually have to functionally think about saving money. It just moves. And it's a recurring thing, happens every month, and it actually takes more effort to stop doing it, which then makes you really rethink, like, man, I'm kind of getting low on my accounts. Maybe I need to stop doing this. No, I'm not going to stop doing it. I'm going to stop spending money. All right, so set the float up, make it automatic, and try and set it and forget it. And then record and review monthly. This is if you were going to do the Excel version of it. Again, I wouldn't recommend the Excel version of it, but if you do an Excel version of it, then just know that you're going to have to do a lot of manual work. So in the event that you don't want to do that, use Mint, and it'll do it every month for you. So step number 5 here is protection, and this is where you really want to get clear. We talk to all of our clients about this, and I think it's the best and the worst thing. All insurance is something that you always want to have and never want to use. So life insurance is incredibly important. It's basically a fee that you pay for peace of mind and security for your family. If something were to happen to me today, let's say I passed away tomorrow, I can rest assured knowing that my wife and my children won't have to work, and they can keep my wife can continue to keep the lifestyle she's accustomed to. She can pay off the house. She can, have enough income or revenue till the girls go through high school. And that just makes me feel really good. Now, does it cost money? Sure, but it's not a lot. You can get really good term policies for next to nothing, especially the younger you are and the healthier you are. So term insurance policies are basically another sleep well at night type proposition. And then once you have enough money in those other buckets, that's when you start getting into like cash value, really growth-based life insurance. And that can help from tax benefit perspective. You can use it for, buying investment properties. You can fund other investments through it. It's a whole nother world, right? So at first, just make sure that you have term insurance policy to cover it. And then if it's appropriate based upon your finances, you can move into the whole life or universal policies as well. See, we have some chats here. Thank you so much. I have to get back to work. Yeah, Brittany, no problem. We'll send this to you and the recording in the deck as well. Disability insurance. Almost all of you, my assumption would be somewhat of a key man or key woman. And what I mean by that is, if something happened to you, it would be catastrophic if you couldn't work or earn that revenue, which means you may have to sell your house, really, look at downsizing or changing lifestyle. So you always want a disability insurance policy to cover your average income. So again, if you make $10,000 a month, $7,500 a month, $5,000 a month, You want a disability insurance policy that's an own policy, which means that if you can't do your own job because you've been disabled for any reason, that insurance company will step in and cover your monthly cost of living, right? And so again, huge weight off your shoulders, just knowing, and again, this is a little bit more expensive than life insurance because it's 85,000 times more likely that you're going to be disabled than you'll die. So obviously the likelihood of this happening is greater, but man, the ability for you to be free with that and just know it's okay if something happens to me, it's okay if something happens to my spouse, we have coverage, we'll be fine, we don't have to make any changes. And it's just the cost of protection, right? It's the cost of not working your tail off for 20 years and then becoming disabled and losing everything that you've just worked so hard to build, right? Because that's what happens, right? You have to sell your house, you have to liquidate things, you have to sell stocks, and it just takes you totally out. And then retirement becomes a real hassle, right? So when you think about your income, that's why you have to think about it in terms of tranches, like 10% goes here, 5% to 10% goes towards insurance, this goes here. And as long as it's mapped out, you have a real clear understanding that everything's going well and you're moving towards the right goal there.
Hey, Ryan. Quick fun fact, everybody. I was talking with a representative from New York Life, and I thought it was interesting. They did a study, and close to 70% of people end up using disability insurance in one way or another.
Yeah, and usually people only have it through their work, and usually it's only like 60%. It kicks in after like 6 months, and there's variations of reasons why they wouldn't pay it. So if you have it through work, great. It's typically not enough, so you may want to look at a supplemental policy there. Umbrella insurance. This is something that everyone should have, especially if you're a homeowner. Let's say your 16-year-old's driving, they get an accident, and somebody sues you for $3 million. But your homeowners or your auto insurance policy only covers $1 million, you have $2 million of exposure at that point, right? Where you can get an extra couple $1 million of umbrella policy, which covers everything at a broader scope at a higher level for, an extra $10 a month, right? Or, a couple $100 a year. So make sure to talk to your insurance provider. If you guys do need help with insurance, we have a resource that can help with that as well. And we'll just analyze the policy and make sure you have the appropriate coverages there. But you don't want to just look at home and auto and make sure those are covered. You want the umbrella policy to cover everything else and all the way up to essentially your net worth, right? So somebody can come to you after everything you're worth, and your insurance company just pays it out.
There you go, guys. If you want an introduction to an insurance professional, go ahead and text the same number that that I have in the chat, and Ryan can connect you with one of the insurance professionals we work with.
Yeah, for home and auto, opt for the lower premium, higher deductible. Insurance is supposed to be for like $20,000 losses, not $500 losses. If you're doing everything else right, you can cover the $500,000 losses. You don't want to go through the insurance anyways, because it will just jack up your deductible. So make sure you're paying lower premium, higher deductible, and just make sure it covers you for the larger things. All right, so next is going to be investing, and I'll try and get through this here soon. I know we kind of mapped out an hour for this, but after your money market account has 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, then you can kind of go to the next level, which is 401k. Start with an amount you're comfortable with, try and get it up to a full amount with the employer match, and then open a personal investment account. Here's some tips for kind of personal investment account, but making sure your cost of funds is low, getting the right mix of investments, being diversified, and really looking for like a 7.5 to 9% per year net of fees. So if the person who's running your account charges you 1% per year, ideally you want to make 8.5 to 10% total, and you'll be that 7.5 to 9% per year. Some years you're going to be negative 20, but very rarely. There's been only 3 years where we've been negative in the last 20. Most years it's up, and if you ever pull money out, that you want to put it in and just leave it in, right? Like, don't try and play the game. Don't try and time the market. Best thing to do is put a same amount of money in. It's called dollar cost averaging. You're buying at all the dips, you're buying at the heights, but over time, as it moves up, that investment account really grows. And so when you're thinking of investing in the stock market or in the equities markets, please don't think of it as a short-term thing. Think of it as money you're going to put in there that you don't need to pull out and that can continue to grow, kind of the same way a retirement account does. Albert Einstein says, the compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. can't tell you how valuable this has been in my life, at least since I was able to stop being broke, and getting back into the positive, in just a short period of time. In a 7 year time frame, I've seen what 7 years of compound interest can do when you continue to dollar cost average into something. So to say that I'm excited for the next 20 years is an understatement. But again, it has to be disciplined and consistent there. So
Ryan,
here's a good
quick question.
example. What's up?
Earlier, Jamie had a question about overfunding your 401k. How would you balance that with putting it into an investment account like you were just talking about?
Well, I put it in the 401k first, and then whatever's left over, I'd put into these, because you're going to get a similar rate of return. It's just you can get pre-tax or post-tax returns through your retirement account.
Got it.
This is all going to be full tax, right? So, for example, if you get let's say an 8% return, right, and you start putting, $250 a month into an account, right? That's going to be, after 120 months, $45,000. Now, if you were to pull that money out, you'd be taxed on the difference between how much you've invested and the growth, right? Which could be a fairly high number depending upon, where taxes are at that time. So, after 20 years, you can see we'd have, where is that number? 70,000. Yeah, I think it'd be at this 4% number here. But this would be how much you actually put in, right? So you put in $60,000 over 20 years at $250 a month. And if you get an 8% return, right, that's 147,000. That's $87,000 that you would have made at an 8% return. It's $70,000 at a 7% return. And you just, that's what I'm saying. It's not how much you make, it's what happens with the money that you keep that ends up, creating that wealth for you long term. So even $250 a month, you think that's not going to make much of a difference. 20 years, right? You have that, $130,000 that you didn't have before. It's a big deal. And then if you get into some of these bigger numbers, right? 30 years, have 300,000. If you get 10% returns, it's 565,000. Again, it's all off $250. So you can use that kind of, and you can play with that number. So don't let the up and down of the stock market determine when to buy or sell. Again, it's just compound interest. Put it in there. It's natural human instinct to want to sell when the market's bad and buy when it's good. Like right now, a lot of people are putting money in the market. The time to do that was 2 weeks ago. The best time to have done it was in March. And my investment advisor had to fight me to do it. I had been putting money aside, and I said, I just want to wait for the market to come back. I want to wait for the market to come back, and then I'm going to go in. And the market came back, and it was tanking. If you guys remember back in March, and we went from 29,000 to 19,000. And he goes, "What were you waiting for? This is it. Like, this is your time." And I'm like, "It's going to zero." He's like, "It's not going to zero. It never goes to zero." And so he convinced me to start dollar cost averaging back in May, and it was a phenomenal decision. But it takes an instinct that most people don't have, right? It takes catching a falling sword, knowing that it's not going to fall forever. It's going to turn around. And when you dollar cost average on the way up, it's going to be helpful, right? Most people try and buy at times like today. In the last 3 days, we've seen 3% per day. And then they wonder why they keep buying at the tops, right? And so don't worry about the tops or the bottoms. Every month, put the same amount in and watch what happens. 100,000 singles gives you way more points than striking out before you get going.
Quick question, Ryan. You said over the last 3 days, the markets have gone up, right?
Yes.
And is that, I think I saw something about like the markets actually, something about the election, right? Like how is that, it's impacting the markets right now? Is right now a get an opportunity?
It's always a get an opportunity. Definitely. I mean, again, where it is today is going to be way less than where it's going to be 3 years from now, right? Now, would it have been better 3 days ago? Sure, but you can't control that. It'll probably be better than 3 days from now, right? So don't time it is the thing, right? Just get it in every week, every month, every year, consistently, and watch the compound interest take over, right? You just can't. No one's ever timed the market well, even the best of us. Once you get rolling, you start to see savings pile up, then things get really fun. Right? You can start to make predictions. You can start to make plans, right? You can figure out retirement ages. You can play with those things. You can figure out travel plans. And this is where it really starts to get fun, is when you see the actual maturation of the process, right? So setting goals and managing your plan to those goals is really important. And that's where a financial planner comes into play, because they have all the tools to do that. Some kind of things, term rich versus poor. And poor and middle class and rich priorities. So poor and middle class priorities are, they want employment security, they want consumption for life's comfort, which means they buy a lot of stuff. They try and save money, and with any money left over, they try and invest, but there's typically not much left over. Rich person's priorities are build an investment portfolio first, professional satisfaction, savings, and then they consume things at the end. They're not too concerned about employment security because they're making their own way, and consumption is kind of a last thing. And that's ultimately, from an idealistic perspective, that's where we all want to be. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a great book if you guys get a chance to read it. It says the rich are not necessarily smarter, they just have different priorities. So step 8 is going to be part, again, setting goals and manage your plan is having liquidity for opportunities. So that's why I think, not only is it smart to have that 6 to 12 month, kind of emergency fund, but even overfunding that liquidity bucket for stock market corrections, right? So, I made a promise to myself that if 2008 ever happens again, that I'm not going to be in that same position, because even though a lot of people lost a lot of money in 2008, a lot of billionaires came out of 2008 because they bought real estate, they bought stocks, everything was half off. And now it's 200% more than it was then. But they had to have liquidity to buy at that time. If all their money was tied up in the stock market and in real estate, they would have just rode the wave. They would have rode it down and they would have rode it back up. What you want to do is have your earnings here, so when it goes down, you can just go buy it and then it just skyrockets from there. So having liquidity for times of market corrections, being able to invest in businesses that come along, make real estate investments when you find them, especially in our world, right? We run across these things all the time. So don't ride the market, be the person who buys the market, right? And having liquidity for those opportunities is really important. So that's kind of an extra bucket on top of your emergency fund. Which is kind of again, it's your opportunity bucket, but it's not fully invested all the time. You want that dry powder to be able to use when opportunities arise. So now we still on kind of the managing your plan. There's the earned income versus investment income. For those of you who aren't aware, the number one expense you're going to pay in your life is taxes. So downside to earned income is your tax on earned income, right? Your tax, 10 to 37% based upon your earned income. Really no way to offset that except for some expenses, and they continue to kind of whittle those down. So investment income, on the other hand, this is something that pays you every month. It's a cash flow, which is a quality asset, and lower tax rate, and even possible to pay 0 on it. So the highest tax bracket there is 20%. So, if you have investment income or, capital gains income, the most you're going to pay on that's 20% versus the highest of 37%. You can save 17% on your income because you're earning it from a different source. That's definitely the preferred way to go, which is why you want to take earned income and turn it into passive income as quickly as you can. And you can do that through dividend interest. You can do it through, securitizations. You can do it through investment properties. There's a lot of ways to create the passive or investment income. So as we kind of get towards the end here, remember the 7 laws of money. Create a budget, create your financial rules to live by, and to achieve financial independence, it's going to be helpful to have a financial plan and a budget to get a clear view. So make sure you have a financial planner to help you with those things, because that will help you address every aspect of your finances, and nothing will be left out. So that's it. Saving money is hard, but you can definitely do it. And there is a path to financial freedom if you just follow those steps. Again, pay yourself first, take all those necessary next steps, and hopefully this was helpful for everyone.